When a boy who has nothing is given a place that is worth nothing, he thinks he understands the math. But what he discovered on that forgotten land would change everything. It wasn't about the property, it was about the names etched into the barn wall, and a promise he never knew was made. If you've ever felt like you were starting from zero, or that the past was a closed book, hit that subscribe button. You're in the right place. This story is for you. The day I turned 18 was the day I ceased to exist, at least on paper. For 12 years I had been a ward of the state, a case file, a line item in a budget. Now I was just Leo. The state gives you a cardboard box for your things, and a handshake that feels more like a shove. Ms. Albright, my caseworker for the last 2 years, tried to make it feel like a graduation. She even got a small, waxy cupcake with a single candle that refused to stay lit. "It's a new beginning, Leo," she said, her voice straining for optimism. "The world is yours now." The world felt less like it was mine, and more like something I was being evicted into. She drove me to the bus station, the city's gray, concrete heart. The sky was the color of dishwater, a low, oppressive ceiling that threatened a rain it couldn't be bothered to deliver. We stood there on the curb, the diesel fumes of idling buses filling the air. She handed me a thick manila envelope. It was heavy, heavier than it should have been. "This is it," she said. "Everything from your file. Your birth certificate, social security card, and this." She tapped a smaller, legal-sized envelope tucked inside. "It was left in your name, by your grandfather. It came to our office years ago with instructions to be given to you on your 18th birthday. I stared at it. My grandfather. The name was a ghost, a myth my mother used to whisper about before she got sick. A man who owned a farm somewhere up north. A man who, in my mind, had washed his hands of us. He was a story of abandonment, the first chapter in a book I had tried my best to forget. "What is it?" I asked, my voice flat. "It's a deed," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "To his property, and a key." I pulled it out. A single, old-fashioned skeleton key, its metal worn smooth and dark with age. It felt cold and useless in my palm. "The property was declared derelict years ago, Leo. The taxes haven't been paid in over a decade. The county has a lien on it. Honestly, it's more of a liability than an asset." She also handed me another, more modern-looking business envelope. "This came last week, from a developer, Vantage Holdings. They're buying up a lot of land in that area. They're offering to clear the back taxes and give you $5,000 for the deed. It's a standard lowball offer, but it's $5,000. $5,000 felt like $1 million. It was a bus ticket to somewhere warm, a few months' rent on a room, a buffer against the raw, terrifying freedom I was facing. It was the smart choice, the only choice. "You don't have to decide now," Ms. Albright said, seeing the conflict on my face. "But you don't have a lot of time. The county will foreclose eventually." The bus hissed, its doors folding open. It was my bus. Time to go. "Thank you for everything," I said, the words feeling thin and inadequate. She gave me a rare, genuine smile. "Be good, Leo, and be smart." I nodded, shouldered my duffel bag, and climbed the steps. I didn't look back. I found a seat by a window smeared with grime and watched the city blur into a smudge of gray and brown as we pulled onto the highway. The envelope sat on my lap like a tombstone, a deed to a dead farm and a key to a door that probably didn't exist anymore. This wasn't a beginning. It was a ghost story, and I was the one who had to do the haunting. The bus ride was 6 hours long, a journey that took me from the familiar concrete sprawl into a world that grew progressively greener, and then, as the season turned, a deep, melancholy brown. The towns we passed through got smaller, the buildings lower, the spaces between them wider. I watched the landscape change, feeling like I was traveling backward in time. The other passengers were ghosts, too. A young mother with a tired face, an old man who smelled of mothballs and peppermint, a soldier in uniform staring blankly out the window. We were all in transit, all moving from a place we had left to a place we hadn't yet reached. I felt a strange kinship with them, this silent, temporary community of the displaced. I spent most of the ride staring at the key. It was ornate in a simple, functional way. The head was a plain circle, but the bit was complex, a delicate, toothed pattern. Who makes a key like this anymore? It was a key for a lock made of iron and conviction, not the cheap brass and flimsy tumblers of the group home doors. I thought about the $5,000. It was a clean break. Sign a paper, cash a check, and be free of this last, tenuous link to a family I never had. My grandfather, Arthur Vance. I tried to picture him, but all I could conjure was a vague, faceless shape of a farmer from an old painting. Overalls, a stern face, hands thick with dirt. A man who owned land but couldn't find room for his own daughter and her son. The bitterness was a familiar taste in my mouth. Why leave me this wreck of a place, this burden of back taxes? Was it a final, cruel joke? A way to show me what I could have had if only things had been different? Or was it just an afterthought? A bit of legal loose-end tying by a man who had long since forgotten my existence. The bus finally pulled into my stop, a town called Northwood. It wasn't even a station, just a gravel pull-off next to a gas station with a convenience store attached. The sun was setting, bleeding orange and purple across the horizon, making the stark, leafless trees look like black veins against the sky. I was the only one who got off. The bus pulled away with another hiss, leaving me in a profound and sudden silence, broken only by the hum of the gas station's coolers and the chirping of crickets. The air was different here. It was cold, sharp, and smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. It felt clean in my lungs, a stark contrast to the city's perpetual exhaust fumes. I went inside the store and bought a bottle of water and a bag of chips, the first purchase of my new life. The woman behind the counter had gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and eyes that saw more than you wanted them to. "You're not from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am," I said. "Just arrived." "Bus don't run back through till morning," she noted, ringing up my items. "Got a place to stay?" I hesitated. "I'm heading out to the old Vance farm." Her hands paused over the cash register. She looked at me, really looked at me this time. Her expression softened with something that looked like pity. "Arthur's place? Lord, child, no one's been out there in years. The house is probably half fallen in by now." "It's all I've got," I said quietly. She finished the transaction and pushed the change across the counter. "It's a good 5-mile walk. Straight down this road, hang a right at the old stone church. You can't miss it. The road turns to dirt. His is the last place on that line." She paused, then reached under the counter and pulled out a heavy, rubberized flashlight. "Here," she said, placing it next to my chips. "You'll need this. No charge. Just be careful out there." I was taken aback by the small, unexpected kindness. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick. "I will." I left the store and stood in the growing dark, the flashlight a heavy, solid weight in my hand. 5 miles. It seemed like 100. But there was nothing else to do. I squared my shoulders, adjusted the duffel bag, and started walking. The asphalt gave way to a cracked and potholed road, and the few streetlights of the town disappeared behind me, plunging me into a darkness that was absolute. The only light was the cone from my new flashlight, dancing on the road ahead, and the sliver of a moon that hung in the star-dusted sky. The world felt huge and empty. I had never felt so alone. The silence was unnerving at first. In the city there was always noise, a constant hum of traffic and life. Here the silence was a living thing, punctuated by the rustle of unseen animals in the woods that lined the road, and the sound of my own breathing, my own footsteps on the gravel. I passed the stone church she mentioned, a dark skeletal shape against the sky, its steeple like a finger pointing to heaven. As promised, the road turned to dirt, rutted and uneven. The walk was long, and the cold was starting to seep into my thin jacket. Doubt began to creep in, a cold little voice whispering in my ear. "This is a mistake. Go back. Take the money. You don't belong here." But where was back? There was no back for me. There was only forward, into this darkness, toward a ruin I was supposed to call my own. After what felt like an eternity, I saw it. A rusted mailbox leaning sideways, half swallowed by weeds. The name on the side was almost completely faded, but I could just make out the letters. VANCE. This was it. A long, overgrown driveway snaked off the dirt road and disappeared into a thicket of trees. I took a deep breath and turned, the flashlight beam cutting a path through the tangled branches. The driveway opened into a clearing, and there it was, the house. The woman at the store hadn't been exaggerating. It was a skeleton, a 2-story farmhouse, its white paint peeled away to reveal the gray, weathered wood beneath. The roof sagged in the middle like a tired old man's back, and several windows were boarded up, while others were just dark, gaping holes. A porch wrapped around the front, its railing broken in several places, one corner dipping precariously toward the ground. To the left stood a massive barn, its shape even more imposing in the dark, its red paint faded to a dull, rusty brown. The whole place was being slowly reclaimed by nature. Vines crawled up the walls of the house, and the yard was a wild meadow of tall, dead grass and thorny bushes. It didn't look abandoned. It looked defeated. For a long moment, I just stood there, at the edge of the driveway, the beam of my flashlight playing over the scene of decay. This was my inheritance, a pile of rotting wood and forgotten memories. The $5,000 felt very, very real in that moment. It was a ticket out of this sad, forgotten place. But then I looked at the key in my hand. It was a question, an invitation. To do what? To see what? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't turn back without finding out. I walked toward the house, my feet crunching on the gravel and dry leaves. The air was still and heavy, thick with the smell of wet earth and decay. I stepped onto the porch, testing each board with my weight before putting my full trust in it. It groaned in protest, but held. The front door was a solid piece of wood, scarred and weathered, with a large iron lock. I raised the key, my hand trembling slightly, and pushed it into the keyhole. It slid in with a satisfying metallic click. I turned it. For a moment, nothing happened. It was stuck fast with rust and time. I put my other hand on it and twisted with all my strength. There was a loud, grating screech, a sound of protest from deep within the mechanism, and then a heavy thunk as the bolt slid back. The door was unlocked. I took another deep breath, turned the knob, and pushed. The door swung inward on creaking hinges, opening into a darkness that was even more profound than the night outside. It was the darkness of a place that had been sealed for a long time, and it smelled of dust, mildew, and something else, something like old paper and faded lives. I swept the flashlight beam across the entryway. A wide hallway stretched before me, with a staircase rising to the left. Dust motes danced in the light like tiny, frantic ghosts. Everything was covered in a thick, gray blanket of it. To the right was a doorway leading into what looked like a living room. I could see the shapes of furniture shrouded in white cloths, like a congregation of silent, patient specters. I stepped inside, my boots echoing on the wooden floorboards. The air was cold and dead. I walked through the downstairs rooms, my light cutting through the gloom. The living room, a dining room with a long table still set with dusty plates. A kitchen where a calendar from 15 years ago was still hanging on the wall. May, the month I turned 3. It was a time capsule, a museum of a life that had simply stopped. Everything was neat, just covered in the sediment of time. It wasn't the home of a man who had left in a hurry. It was the home of a man who had planned to come back, but never did. I found his study at the back of the house. A heavy oak desk sat in the middle of the room, facing a large window that was now boarded up. Bookshelves lined the walls, the books all still in place, their spines faded and brittle. I ran my fingers over them. History, agriculture, poetry. I pulled one out. Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass. A slip of paper was tucked inside, a bookmark. On it, in a neat, strong cursive, was a single sentence. A man is a summons and a challenge. I put the book back, the phrase echoing in my head. I didn't feel like a challenge. I felt like a trespasser. Overwhelmed, I left the house and walked toward the barn. It loomed even larger up close, its double doors tall enough to drive a tractor through. One of the doors hung slightly ajar, and I slipped through the gap into the cavernous space inside. The air in here was different. It smelled of old hay, earth, and machine oil. It was vast, the ceiling soaring high into the darkness, supported by massive hand-hewn wooden beams. Thin slivers of moonlight cut through the gaps in the siding, striping the dusty floor with silver. It was a cathedral of forgotten work. My flashlight beam danced across old farm equipment sleeping under tarps, piles of rotting hay bales, and empty animal stalls. It felt ancient and sacred. And then I saw it. On the largest of the central support beams, the one holding up the main weight of the roof, were names. Dozens of them. They weren't painted, they were carved into the wood, etched with care, the letters deep and sure. I walked closer, running the beam of light over them. Some were first and last names, some just initials. Each one was followed by a date. Maria Sanchez, 1998. DJ, 2001. The Millers, 2004. My light stopped on a name near the bottom, one of the more recent carvings. Sarah Vance, 2005. My mother. And below it, another name, the last one on the beam. Leo Vance, 2006. My own name. I reached out and touched the letters, my fingers tracing the grooves in the wood. It was my name. Carved into this barn, in this place I'd never been, by a man I'd never known. Why? What did it mean? I looked at all the other names, the silent community etched into the heart of this barn. Who were these people? Why were their names here, alongside my mother's and my own? It wasn't a property ledger. It was a monument. It was a record. But of what? A cold wind whistled through the barn, and I shivered, though not entirely from the cold. I suddenly felt like I was not alone. The weight of all those names, all those years, pressed in on me. This place wasn't empty. It was full of stories. And I realized, standing there in the heart of that dark, silent barn, that I couldn't leave. Not yet. I couldn't take the $5,000 and walk away from this. This was a mystery, and for the first time in my life, it was a mystery that had my name on it. I had to know what it meant. The next morning, I woke up on the floor of the living room, wrapped in a dusty sheet I'd pulled off one of the armchairs. My neck was stiff, and a pale, watery sunlight was filtering through the dirty windows. The house was quieter in the daylight, but no less intimidating. The dust seemed thicker, the decay more apparent. The reality of my situation settled in with the morning chill. I had no food, no running water, no electricity. I had a few $100s to my name, a derelict farm, and a mystery. For a moment, the sheer insanity of it all threatened to overwhelm me. The $5,000 offer from Vantage Holdings felt like a lifeline, a rope thrown to a drowning man. All I had to do was grab it. But then I thought of the names in the barn. My name. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were the answer to a question I hadn't even known how to ask. I spent the morning searching the house. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. A journal, a photo album, anything that could put a face to the name Arthur Vance and explain the carvings. I started in the study, the most personal room in the house. I went through the desk drawers. They were filled with the mundane artifacts of a life. Old receipts, pens that no longer wrote, bundles of twine, seed catalogs from decades past. In the bottom drawer, I found a small tin box. It was locked. I shook it, but nothing rattled inside. I tried to pry it open, but it was solid. Frustrated, I set it aside. I moved to the bookshelves, pulling out books one by one, shaking them, hoping something would fall out. Nothing. I searched the bedroom, the closets filled with faded work shirts and overalls that still smelled faintly of my grandfather. I searched the kitchen, the pantry still stocked with canned goods from a forgotten time. I found nothing. By midday, I was covered in dust, hungry, and no closer to an answer. The house was holding its secrets tight. I sat on the dusty floor of the study, feeling a wave of despair wash over me. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just a kid chasing ghosts, projecting meaning onto the random carvings of a lonely old man. Maybe the smart thing to do was to walk back to town and call the number on the developer's letter. As I sat there, my eyes drifted to a spot on the floor, partially hidden by the heavy desk. The floorboards there were a slightly different color, the seams a little wider. I crawled over and pushed on one of the boards. It gave, just a little. My heart started to beat faster. I used my fingers to pry at the edge. It was stuck fast. I ran to the kitchen and found an old rusty butter knife in a drawer. I used it as a lever, jamming it into the seam and wiggling it back and forth. The wood groaned, and then with a final splintering crack, the board came loose. I pulled it up. And there, nestled in the dark space between the floor joists, was a large metal box. It was an old military-style ammunition can, painted dark olive green. It was heavy. I lifted it out and set it on the floor. It wasn't locked, just sealed with two heavy latches. I flicked them open. The sound echoed in the silent house. I lifted the lid. The inside was packed tight. On top was a thick ledger, its black cover faded and worn. Beneath it, bundled in twine, were dozens of letters, the paper yellowed with age. And right on top of the first bundle was a single, sealed envelope. In that same strong, neat cursive from the bookmark, it read, "For Leo, on his 18th birthday." My breath caught in my throat. This was it. This was what he had left for me. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. I broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The letter began without preamble. "Leo, if you are reading this, then you are 18, and you have come home. I am sorry I was not there to welcome you. I am sorry for a great many things. Most of all, I am sorry that you have grown up believing I abandoned you and your mother. It is the great regret of my life that I let you believe that lie. But it was a necessary one. I need you to understand, this farm, this land, it is more than just dirt and wood. For a long time, it was a sanctuary, a place of last resort for people who had nowhere else to turn. People running from bad debts, from bad men, from bad situations they couldn't escape on their own. Our family has always been here, and we have always helped. It's what we do. The names in the barn are a record of the people who passed through here. We gave them a place to stay, a hot meal, a way to get back on their feet, or a way to disappear and start a new life somewhere else. It was quiet work, dangerous work. A man named Marcus Thorne ran this county for 30 years. He owned the bank, he owned the sheriff, and he believed he owned the people. He squeezed farmers with predatory loans, and when they couldn't pay, he took their land for pennies on the dollar. His company was called Thorne Agriculture then. Now his son runs it, and they call themselves Vantage Holdings, a prettier name for the same ugly business. When your mother was young, I helped a family, the Garzas, escape Thorne. He wanted their land for a new development. They refused to sell, so he manufactured a debt and threatened to ruin them. I got them out, sent them to family in another state. Thorne found out. He couldn't prove anything, but he made it clear that if I ever crossed him again, he would hurt the people I loved. He would hurt your mother. So, when she left for the city with you, a newborn baby, I had to make a choice. I could follow her, be a grandfather to you, and put you both in Thorne's line of fire. Or I could stay here, cut ties, and let him believe I had nothing left to protect. I chose to protect you. I let your mother believe I was a bitter old man who wanted nothing to do with her. I let the world think I had disowned my own family. Every dollar I could spare, I sent to her anonymously, through a church charity. It wasn't much, but it was what I could do without leading Thorne to your door. The lie broke my heart, but it kept you safe. This land is your birthright, Leo, but it comes with a choice. Vantage Holdings will try to take it. They have been waiting for me to die for years. They will offer you money. It will be tempting. You could take it and walk away, and no one would blame you. Or you could stay. You could fight. You could keep this place what it has always been, a sanctuary, a thorn in the side of men like Thorne. The ledger in this box details everything. The money I spent, the people I helped, the evidence I gathered against Thorne's operation over the years. It may be enough to give you a fighting chance. The choice is yours. Whatever you decide, know this. I have loved you every day of your life. I have watched you from a distance, and I have never been more proud. Your grandfather, Arthur Vance. I read the letter 3 times, the words blurring through my tears. The story of my life, the one I had built around the central pillar of my grandfather's abandonment, crumbled into dust. He hadn't abandoned me. He had protected me. The bitterness I had carried for so long was replaced by a profound, aching grief for the man I had never known, for the love I had never understood. I cried. I sat on that dusty floor and cried for the boy who grew up feeling unwanted, for the mother who died believing her father didn't love her, and for the old man who had died alone in this house, carrying the weight of his sacrifice in silence. It was a storm of grief, years of it, held back and finally released. When the tears finally subsided, I opened the ledger. It was filled with my grandfather's neat, methodical script. Page after page of names, dates, and numbers. Maria Sanchez, bus ticket to San Diego, $158. Winter coat, $60. Cash for new start, $500. The Millers, paid off loan to Thorn Agriculture, $3,200. Temporary housing, 4 months. It went on and on, a secret history of quiet rebellion and radical generosity. He had bankrupted himself, saving people. Tucked into the back of the ledger were documents, copies of predatory loan agreements from Thorn Agriculture, sworn affidavits from people he had helped, a detailed timeline of Marcus Thorn's criminal activities. It was a weapon, a lifetime of evidence, waiting for someone to use it. I spent the rest of the day and into the night reading the letters. They were mostly from the people he had helped, letters of thanks, sent from new lives in faraway places. A Christmas card from the Millers with a photo of their new baby. A postcard from Maria Sanchez showing the beach in San Diego with a simple message, "I am safe, thank you." He had kept every single one. This house wasn't a tomb. It was an archive of hope. The weight of it all settled on me. This wasn't just a choice about a piece of land anymore. It was about legacy. It was about justice. My grandfather had passed the torch to me. Could I carry it? I was just a kid. I had nothing. No money, no power, no knowledge of how to fight a company like Vantage Holdings. The fear was a physical thing, a cold knot in my stomach. The $5,000 was the easy way out, the safe way out. I could take that money and disappear, just like the people my grandfather had helped. I could start a new life, free from this burden. No one would know. But I would know. I would know that I had sold out his memory, that I had let men like Thorn win. I fell asleep on the floor again, the letter clutched in my hand, my head filled with the ghosts of my grandfather and the weight of his final question. The next day, I made a decision. I gathered the ledger, the letter, and a few of the most compelling documents and put them in my duffel bag. I used the last of my cash to take the morning bus back to the city. I had to see Miss Albright. She was the only person I knew who might understand, who might be able to help me navigate this. When I walked into her office, she looked surprised to see me. "Leo? What happened? Did you change your mind about the offer?" "No," I said, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. "Something else. I need to show you something." I laid the letter and the ledger on her desk. She picked up the letter and began to read. I watched her face as she did, saw her professional skepticism slowly melt away, replaced by something else. Shock. Empathy. When she finished, she looked up at me, her eyes wide. "My God, Leo." She spent the next hour looking through the ledger, reading the affidavits. She was methodical, her social worker's brain analyzing, assessing. "This is incredible," she said finally, leaning back in her chair. "This is a lifetime of evidence. But," she fixed me with a serious gaze, "it's also dangerous. These are powerful people. Vantage Holdings has a team of lawyers who are experts at burying things like this. A ledger from a dead man isn't going to be enough to stop them in court. They'll paint him as a disgruntled crank, a vigilante. They'll say these documents are forgeries. So what do? I asked, the hope that had been building in me starting to fray. "You said it yourself, Leo. Your grandfather gave you a choice." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You can give this to the authorities, though I can't guarantee they'll do anything with it. Or you can use it as leverage. or you can walk away. The offer from Vantage is still on the table. In fact, she picked up a piece of paper from her desk. They called this morning. They've increased their offer to $10,000. They're getting impatient. $10,000. It was a life-changing amount of money for me. It was safety. It was a real future. All I had to do was let the past go. For a moment, I was tempted, deeply tempted. I thought about a small apartment, a steady job, a life without this fight, a normal life. "What do you think I should do?" I asked her. She looked at me for a long time. "It's not my place to say. My job is to tell you the risks, and the risk here is huge. You could lose. You could end up with nothing. Worse, you could make some very powerful enemies." She leaned forward. "But I will tell you this. In all my years of doing this job, I have seen so many kids come out of the system with nothing to hold on to, no story that is truly their own. You've been given a story, Leo, a powerful one. What you do with it is up to you." Her words hit me harder than any threat or warning could have. You've been given a story. I thought of my grandfather, alone in that house, writing that letter. I thought of the names in the barn, a silent chorus of witnesses. I thought of the phrase from his book, "A man is a summons and a challenge." I knew what I had to do. I pulled out my phone, the cheap burner I'd bought with my last few dollars. I looked at the letter from Vantage Holdings that Ms. Albright had. The name of the lawyer was at the bottom, Jonathan Thorne, the son. I dialed the number. A crisp, professional voice answered. "Thorne? My name is Leo Vance," I said. "I'm calling about the property on Old Creek Road." "Ah, Mr. Vance, good to hear from you. I trust you've considered our generous offer?" His voice was smooth, confident, the voice of a man who always got what he wanted. "I have," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked at Ms. Albright, who was watching me with a tense expression. I took a deep breath. "The offer is rejected. The property is not for sale." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. "I see," Thorne said, his voice losing its friendly edge, becoming cold and hard. "I think you're making a serious mistake, son. That property is worthless. The back taxes alone are insurmountable for someone in your position. We are your only way out." "I'm not looking for a way out," I said. "I'm staying. And I have a message for you from my grandfather." I opened the ledger to a random page. "He wanted you to know that the Millers are doing just fine. They have 3 kids now, and Maria Sanchez loves the beach." The silence on the other end was now charged, hostile. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice tight. "Oh, I think you do," I said. "I'll be seeing you, Mr. Thorne." I hung up the phone. I looked at Ms. Albright. She had a small, proud smile on her face. "Well," she said, "I guess you've made your choice." She stood up and walked over to a filing cabinet. "In that case, you're going to need a lawyer. A real one. I know a guy. He works pro bono for cases like this. He likes sticking it to big corporations." She pulled out a card and handed it to me. "His name is Ben Carter. Tell him I sent you, and tell him you have a story he's going to want to hear." The first few months were the hardest. The fight with Vantage Holdings started immediately. Official-looking letters began arriving at the farm, which I now had to check the mailbox for. Notices of foreclosure, legal threats, summonses. They were trying to intimidate me, to bury me in paperwork I couldn't understand. But now I wasn't alone. Ben Carter was a force of nature. He was a rumpled, middle-aged man with a sharp mind and a deep-seated hatred for bullies. He took one look at my grandfather's ledger, and his eyes lit up. "This is a goddamn treasure trove," he'd said, a grin spreading across his face. "This isn't just about your farm, kid. This is about a pattern of predatory behavior going back decades. We can't just defend, we have to attack." He filed a countersuit against Vantage, citing a history of racketeering and fraud, using my grandfather's meticulous records as evidence. The legal battle was slow and grinding, a war of attrition fought through motions and depositions. It would take years, Ben warned me, but it had started. While the lawyers fought, I had my own war to wage. The farm was my responsibility now. I moved back, this time for good. I used the last of my money to buy cleaning supplies, basic tools, and non-perishable food. I spent my days engaged in a kind of physical archaeology, digging the house out from under years of dust and neglect. I started in the kitchen. I scrubbed the floors on my hands and knees, cleaned the grime from the windows, and polished the old wood-burning stove until the nickel plating gleamed. There was no electricity or running water, so my life became elemental. I hauled water from an old hand-pump well I found behind the house, the water coming up cold and clear and tasting of iron. I learned to cook on the wood stove, my first few meals a smoky, burnt disaster. But eventually, I got the hang of it. I chopped wood for hours, the rhythmic work of the axe, a kind of therapy, my body growing stronger, my mind clearer with every swing. I was living a life 100 years out of time, and I had never felt more present. One day, I was in town buying supplies at the general store when the woman who had given me the flashlight, whose name I learned was Martha, struck up a conversation. "Heard you're staying out at the old Vance place," she said, ringing up my cans of beans and bags of flour. "Heard you're fighting the Thorns." News traveled fast in a small town. "I'm trying," I said. She finished bagging my groceries and then looked me in the eye. "Your grandfather was a good man," she said quietly. "He helped my family out of a jam once, a long time ago. He never said a word about it, just did it." She pushed a bag of apples across the counter. "These are on the house. You keep fighting the good fight, son." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. It was the first crack in the wall of my isolation. A few days later, an old pickup truck rumbled up my driveway. An elderly man with hands like gnarled oak branches got out. He introduced himself as Jim Peterson. "I knew your grandfather," he said, his voice a low rumble. "We weren't close, but I respected him. Heard you're trying to get the place back in shape." He gestured to the sagging porch. "Can't have that. A man's porch is his welcome mat." He spent the rest of the day with me, showing me how to jack up the corner of the porch, replace the rotted support posts, and nail down new floorboards. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He taught me things my own father never had the chance to. As the seasons turned, others started to appear. A woman named Elena dropped off a box of old blankets and quilts. A farmer from down the road, Mr. Henderson, showed up with a small, used generator. "Can't have you living in the dark all winter," he'd grumbled, before showing me how to run it. Little by little, a community was forming around me, a network of support woven from the threads of my grandfather's quiet legacy. They weren't just helping me, they were honoring him. I wasn't just Leo Vance, the kid from the system anymore. I was Arthur Vance's grandson. I belonged to this place. The house slowly started to feel less like a ruin and more like a home. I cleared out the dust and the cobwebs, patched the roof, and replaced the broken window panes. I left my grandfather's study exactly as it was, a quiet memorial to the man I was getting to know through his books and his belongings. My favorite place, however, remained the barn. I would go there at the end of a long day of work and just sit, looking at the names on the beam. They were my history, my family. They were the reason I was here. I made a promise to them, and to my grandfather, that as long as I was here, this place would be a sanctuary. It would be a place of safety, a place of hope. The fight was far from over. Vantage Holdings was not giving up, but neither was I. I had something to fight for now. I had a home. Winter settled over the farm, a deep, quiet cold that covered the world in a blanket of white. The work slowed down. There was less to do outside, more time to be inside, by the warmth of the wood stove, thinking. The legal battle with Vantage was in a lull, the lawyers exchanging papers while the world held its breath under the snow. It was in that quiet, reflective time that the true meaning of my inheritance settled in my soul. My grandfather hadn't left me a piece of property. He hadn't left me a legal battle or a pile of debt. He had left me a purpose. For my entire life, I had been defined by what I lacked: a father, a mother, a home, a history. I was a collection of absences. But here, in this forgotten place, I was discovering that I was part of something. I had a story. It was a difficult story, a story of sacrifice and struggle. But it was mine. It was written in the wood of the barn, in the pages of the ledger, in the quiet nods of respect from the people in town. Home, I realized, isn't just a place you live. It's a place that lives in you. It's the story you tell yourself about who you are and where you come from. For years, my story had been one of abandonment. Now, it was a story of protection. It was a story of quiet defiance, of standing up for the little guy, of choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. My grandfather had given me more than a farm. He had given me a new way to see myself. I wasn't a victim of my circumstances anymore. I was a guardian of a legacy. One evening, sitting at my grandfather's desk, I found a small, unmarked wooden box in the back of a drawer. It wasn't locked. Inside, on a bed of faded velvet, was a small collection of items. A lock of blonde hair tied with a ribbon, my mother's. A tiny, bronzed baby shoe, mine. And a handful of photographs. The first one was of my grandfather, a younger man, his face weathered but smiling, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a blanket. My mother. The second was of my mother as a teenager, laughing, sitting on the porch of this very house, a porch that I had just helped to rebuild. And the last one was of me, a small, blurry photo of a toddler on a city playground. He had been watching over me all that time. He had kept these small treasures, these pieces of us, hidden away like a secret prayer. Looking at that photo, I finally understood the depth of his sacrifice. He had given up the joy of watching me grow, the comfort of family, all to keep me safe. He had chosen a life of loneliness so that I could have a life of freedom. The weight of that love was immense, a heavy, beautiful thing. It was a debt I could never repay, only honor. I realized that fixing this farm wasn't just about fighting Vantage or preserving a piece of land. It was about rebuilding the home he had sacrificed. It was about making it a place of warmth and life again. It was about finishing his work. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the fields in a clean, white peace. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly at home. I wasn't just occupying a house, I was inhabiting a story. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was where I was meant to be. I was Arthur Vance's grandson, and I was home. So, here we are. The legal battle is still ongoing. It's a slow, messy process. There are good days and bad days. Some days I get a letter from Ben that makes me feel like we're winning. Other days I get a notice from Vantage's lawyers that makes my stomach sink. But we're still here. We're still fighting. The farm is coming back to life. This spring, with the help of Mr. Henderson, I planted a small vegetable garden. Watching the first green shoots push their way up through the dark earth felt like a miracle. It felt like a promise. The community that has gathered around me has become my family. We have potluck dinners on my newly repaired porch. Jim tells stories about the old days. Martha brings her famous apple pie. We are a mismatched collection of people, bound together by a shared history and a shared belief in doing the right thing. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll win in court. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully restore this place to what it once was. But I've learned that the outcome isn't the only thing that matters. What matters is the fight itself. What matters is showing up every day and trying to honor the legacy that was left to you. What matters is choosing to build something instead of just accepting what's broken. This story, my story, is about inheritance, but not the kind you read about in wills. It's about the stories, the values, the responsibilities that are passed down to us, often in silence. We all inherit something: a grandmother's kindness, a father's temper, a mother's resilience, a history of struggle, or a legacy of strength. Sometimes we don't even know what we've been given until we're forced to look closer, to dig under the floorboards of our own lives. And that's what I want to ask you. What have you inherited? Not money or property, but a story, a value, a piece of a person you carry with you. Have you ever discovered something about your family's past that changed the way you see yourself? If this story has resonated with you, if it's made you think about your own legacy, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments below. This channel is a place for stories like this, the ones that are a little messy, a little complicated, but ultimately full of hope. Your stories matter. They are a part of a larger conversation about who we are and what we choose to carry forward. If you want to be a part of this community, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It helps more than you know. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. For me, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to keep fixing this house, planting this garden, and fighting this fight. Because my grandfather left me more than a farm. He left me a summons and a challenge. And I'm finally ready to answer.